topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Churchill said, "Those who fail to learn from history are condemned to repeat it." Kevin Hallinan believes that certainly applies to business. Welcome to Winning Business Radio, here at W4CY Radio. That's W4CY.com. And now, your host, Kevin Hallinan.
Thanks, everybody, for joining in again today. I'm Kevin Hallinan, and welcome back to Winning Business TV and Radio on W4CY.com. We're streaming live on Talk4TV.com, in addition to on Facebook, and that's at Winning Business Radio. And, of course, we're available in podcast after the live show on many other platforms, including YouTube, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Apple, pretty much wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. It's about 100 in number. We are there. The mission of this show, Winning Business TV and Radio, as regular listeners and viewers know, is to offer insights and advice to really help people avoid the mistakes of others, right? To learn best practices, the how-tos, the what-tos, the what-not-tos, to be challenged, and I always say to certainly and hopefully to be inspired by the successes of others. But, you know, virtually every successful person that I've ever talked to has had some form of failure in their lives and careers. So while we all have to get our knees scraped once in a while, I always say I'm driven to keep those scrapes from needing major surgery. Let's endeavor to learn from history so we don't repeat it. Today, my guest is Kim Calvi, owner of Boston Edit's The Word Lady. We'll get into that in a bit. Here's her bio. Kim Calvi founded Boston Edits, LLC 21 years ago. That's 2003. Prior to starting her company, she held roles including a technical editor for a large public technology company, a contracts editor paralegal for a law firm, an editorial assistant at a consumer law organization, a bilingual proofreader at one of the largest financial institutions in the U.S. In short, Kim writes content for B2B professionals. As she says, she loves what she does since she truly enjoys learning about other forward-thinking professionals, you know, how they became subject matter experts in their relative fields and what makes them better and different. She enjoys providing content media services to senior-level B2B decision makers such as blog writing, website content, documentation editing, PR, marketing collateral across all social media platforms, in particular Google Business Profile, which maximizes search engine optimization and increases client visibility. She also hosts her own podcast show, inviting B2B guests and clients to discuss their services and what is distinct about their business. Her other services include social media management and facilitating industry-related periodical advertising. When she's not, I love this line, when she's not wielding the proverbial red Sharpie in her hand, she spends her time with her partner, Brad, either downhill skiing at Loon Mountain in Lincoln, New Hampshire, or surfing in Newport, Rhode Island. Other passions include reading, cooking, and working out. She's a weightlifting aficionado and a yoga devotee. Kim, welcome to Winning Business Radio and TV. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a real privilege.
Oh, well, it's a privilege for me. Tell us, just to give us a little bit of background, where did you grow up, and tell us about that town or city?
Well, I grew up in a lot of places because when my parents were still married to each other, my father was a commercial pilot, so he was transferred a lot. Cool. So I lived pretty much all over the United States, but we are from Hingham. And after my parents split up, I finished high school in Andover on the North Shore, but now I'm a resident on the South Shore. So I've come full circle. And I did spend a little bit of time in my 20s living in Spain by myself.
That's very cool. That's where you learned Spanish.
Sí.
That was second nature. You didn't have to think about that one.
Right.
So when you were younger, what were your earlier interests?
When I was younger, how young? So
high school.
High school?
Yeah.
So when I was in junior high, I entered a couple of writing contests for fiction. And fiction's not really my thing. Obviously, I love to read fiction, historical fiction and so forth. But I am not a fiction writer. There's too much story arcing and character development. But at least I tried. But reading and writing has always been my thing. And I think I got into the habit of writing, oddly enough, from my grandfather, my maternal grandfather. He used to write letters to me and I would write back. So that was when I was really little. And that just continued throughout my life, and until he died. So I've always been around books. I remember going to the library when I was 4 years old and being so proud to get my library card.
That's amazing.
Libraries are my first love. That was my job when I was in high school. All of my friends thought I was crazy. They were like, "Why don't you want to babysit or work at Friendly's?" And I was like, "No, I am happy around books." So anyway, reading, writing, being around books, that's been my thing since forever.
So that's why I ask, because very often that's how people end up where they are,
Right.
Not always, but quite often. So now college, what made you choose Emmanuel College in Boston and then to major in business administration?
Okay, so I went to college as an adult. I didn't go to college right out of high school. I waited until I was in my late 20s, early 30s, and I was grateful that I went because I felt like I got more out of it than I might have done if gone right out of high school. Because it was business.
Was that a conscious decision not to go right away?
More or less.
And by the way, there's no judgment in that. Some people
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was one of those things where circumstances were such that it wasn't something that was going to happen right out of high school. But I always knew I would get there, and I did. And when I did go, I loved the idea of the school and being I'm a Boston girl. What can I say? I lived everywhere. I keep coming home. And I loved the school. They had an adult learners program. It was called ECAP. It was an Emmanuel College Adult Program. I think that's what it stood for. And everybody in my class I was actually on the younger side, and
really,
yeah.
I was going to say at in your late 20s, going to college to me is an even greater accomplishment because it's more difficult. Life's going on, et cetera.
Oh, for sure. And I did. I did 4 years and 3 years while working full time because I think there's something to be said. When you waited that long, you're just that driven. You just not. It has nothing to do with wanting to get it over with, and that's not it. I mean, although I definitely felt that way about my accounting courses, but. But everything else about it was just richer. It was a richer experience. And I felt like I brought more to the table. And I know I definitely got more out of my education there. So I was glad that I went, and no looking back.
That's awesome. And here's a question I like to ask often. How did you get your first professional job?
So my first professional job.
Smiling already. That's a good story.
Because the story always makes me laugh.
Yeah.
So, all right. So I came home from Spain. And I was living in the North End. I'd gotten myself a little studio apartment, and I was doing some temp work. And I landed this temp job as a temp receptionist. And I was actually started off as a temp for the temp. And so the other temp didn't come back, and so they kept me. And I think I started like in the fall or something like that. And months were going by, and and I kept asking the HR person, I'm really interested in the job. You seem to like me. Can we just put this together? And yeah. Nothing ever happened. So back in the day when I had a tremendous amount of bravado, the office was, you got off the elevator, you were right there in the reception area. So one Monday morning, and this is back in the day when everybody was still reading the paper, the president of the company got off the elevator, and I'm sitting there with the paper, and he said, "Good morning, Kimmy. What are you doing?" And I said, "Looking for a job." And he's like, "Well, aren't you happy here?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "I am." I said, "But it's been months and nothing's happening." And anyway, long story short, within 2 weeks, they had hired me.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That is awesome.
And I got a better job. They didn't hire me for the receptionist position. They put me in the IT, the tech, because it was a consultancy. They put me in the IT department, and I was, for what it's worth, it was the only female, and I was young. I was in my mid-20s, and surrounded by professional men. I've been doing this a long time. And they had me, my boss at the time, Bob, lovely gentleman. He decided he wanted to start a weekly newsletter for the company, and he put me in charge of that. So my first big girl job, I was just lobbying for the receptionist position. I ended up with something far better. And I think that's been a huge part of the trajectory that's been my career.
Was that the Yankee Group?
Yes. It
was. Yeah. Okay. I peeked on your LinkedIn profile to but then you landed, so you're there for a couple of years. Then you landed, or at least not too long after, at a very large company, the subject of Aaron Brockovich, for those that have seen that movie, W.R. Grace.
Yes.
Tell us about that position.
Yeah. So I somebody just called me out of the blue one day and they said, we've got this marketing position and, we saw your resume, and I don't even know where they saw it. Don't ask me. And they're just like, this is what the position is. This is something you think you'd be interested in. It's a little more dynamic. And because at the time I was in school, so I was doing a lot of contract work, a lot of temp work, because I didn't want, I was working full time, but I didn't want the pressure of working necessarily for a company. I just thought, okay, I've got to pay the bills, but I really want to focus on my studies. Anyway, but once I got that down pat, I was glad to take this position. And I learned an awful lot about marketing. I learned a lot about event planning, trade shows, publication, packaging. One of the things that I did was a special project. We worked with the Architectural Institute in Boston, and we created we partnered with them. And we created a contest. And I designed the brochure and wrote all the content for it. And then these architectural students had to create a fictitious building in the Charlestown area, in the cool. Navy Yard. To this day, I still have the brochure that I designed. So that was one of the little thing cool. that I learned there. And yeah. So, yeah.
I'll interject the question, your most important lesson learned, but I'll skip it for grace and I'll go to Graphique de France.
Yes.
How's that? I can't speak French, but you were there for a couple of years. Tell us about that company. Very intriguing name.
Yes. Okay. So the owner of the company, Jean-Jacques, was from France, and he started, I guess over here, he was selling, I want to say posters, but I don't think that's right. So please don't quote me. But in any case, sure. His company grew. And so it became like a lot of the calendars that you see at the bookstores are from Graphique de France. If you look on the back, you'll see the logo. Oh. Greeting cards, posters, and postcards. And it was a temp assignment, and I loved it. It was, talk about a creative outlet. When you just walk into the showroom, and there's all these wonderful products and everything from I Love Lucy to the Flintstones. Well, maybe not the Flintstones, but the Jetsons or whatever. And then like some vintage Barbie, that kind of thing. And it was just like, this is great. All this is just so much fun just to look at. And I started there covering for somebody who was going on maternity leave, and they liked me so much. When she came back, they created a job for me. Cool. And there was only one editor, believe it or not, in the whole company. And to this day, I still keep in touch with her. She is retired, I believe, and now lives in Arizona. Anyway, her name's Susan. Anyway, she was doing all the editing, and she was inundated. And I was like, well, I send it my way. And that's what I did. I helped her out a lot. It was a big part of my job that they created for me. So again, another stepping stone, another little piece of the puzzle that eventually led us to where I am right now. But anyhow.
So what was your key takeaway from working there?
Ooh, let's see. Collaboration, because we had the writers, we had the artists, the designers, we had the licensing group that we had that they would call the people who own the I Love Lucy logo and all of the imagery for that. So there was a lot of collaboration, and that was my biggest takeaway there. And I really enjoyed it. I really did. I liked that job. It was hard to leave that one.
And then you went to Fidelity not too long thereafter. Huge company, well-known, international brand. Tell us about that role. So
that was another one where someone just called me out of the blue and just said, I saw your experience, and this is what they have a need for this. It's a contract that could lead to permanent, but for the long haul, it's contract. What do you think? And I was like, well, okay, why not? And so I went there and had the interview and liked it because it was editing, and it was more editing. So it was building on what I had been doing primarily at 50% of the time at Graphique de France. And I was like, what
were the materials at Fidelity?
Okay, sure. So 401k prospectuses, stickers, reports. Oh goodness.
Some of those pretty technical then.
Very.
The prospectus is very technical.
Yeah. And so my job was to edit them, first of all, in English, and then we would farm them out to companies that would translate them. And what we had to do is we had to make sure that when they came back, they were translated into Spain Spanish, because
properly.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So that's what I was looking for too. So
I had a client in the still client from time to time, and a friend, political advertising for the Spanish language. And she said without her, people just butcher it.
Oh yeah.
It doesn't translate well. It's like reading Chinese directions for an American product,
Yes. Yeah. That sounds about right. Yeah. And the colloquialisms too. That's really what we were looking out for. It's like, okay, if we're using a particular word, we have, to describe something or that's associated with a particular product, it has to be throughout, the entire document. We can't call it something else someplace else.
All right. We're going to take our first break right here. We'll be back in about a minute with Kim Calvi of Boston Edits.
You're listening to Winning Business Radio with Kevin Hallinan on W4CY Radio. That's W4CY.com. Don't go away. More helpful information is coming right up, right here on Winning Business Radio.
Have you ever dreamt of being on the radio? Well, now is your chance. Be a radio show guest on the #1 ranked internet radio station and promote you and your business for free. Yes, you heard it, free. Business advertising right here on W4CY.com. Call 561-506-4031 now to get booked on one of our shows. That's 561-506-4031. Get your free advertising now.
And now back to Winning Business Radio with Kevin Hallinan, presenting exciting topics and expert guests with one goal in mind, to help you succeed in business. Here once again is Kevin Hallinan.
We're back with Kim Calvi. She's the owner of Boston Edits LLC, and she is, I don't want to get it wrong. I'm going to look at it one more time real quick. The word lady.
Yes.
Where did that come from? It seems appropriate, but did you come up with that? Did somebody else come up with that?
Someone gave that to me. I was at a networking meeting one morning, and another member who had trademarked her line of business, the mortgage lady. She said, right, and she said, "You should call yourself the word lady." And I was like, "Well, let me." Yeah, so I looked on the USPTO website to see if it was taken, and it's not. So I took it.
There you go. Good move.
Yep.
All right. So now take us to the National Consumer Law Center. You're there for about 4 years. To me, when I hear that, I think of, people go there for not just a job, but for the mission. I don't know if that's true with you, but tell us about that role and that firm, or that organization, better said.
Yeah. So that role, that came to me at a good time in my life as well. I mean, I have to say, I'm lucky. I have been very lucky. So that came to me, and I, went for the interview, and I knew that, I was like one of 3 or 4 people. And so they offered me the position. I was there for 4 years, and it was a great 4 years. It flew by in a flash. And my job was to edit the chapters or books, depending on what cycle they were in. Sometimes we were rewriting chapters for supplements, and other times we were rewriting whole books. And the lawyers there wrote their content, and we had to edit it to make sure stylistically that it was correct, grammatically, that which that was actually a minor thing, because most lawyers are pretty good writers, actually. But also just the way it laid out on the page, and then just the footnotes, the detail, the way a legal footnote is written, like that sort of detail. And there were a couple of books where I have to say, I remember going through one of them, and there was a footnote that was 3 or 4 pages long, just the footnote. And you have to go through it. And of course, the writing is smaller. It's a very detailed thing. And yeah, I loved it. My friends thought it was crazy.
This is kind of probably a dumb question, but I'm going to ask anyway. How do you not go cross-eyed when you're editing something?
Yeah, well, that's an excellent question. I think that I've only recently started wearing glasses. I didn't wear glasses when I was working there. So I just think that I think you go cross-eyed if you take your eyes away from it too often. And we would actually talk about that, I remember, in staff meetings, myself and the other editors, that you have the manuscript here, the correct manuscript here, and then you've got something else over here. So you're looking at at least 2 different things, sometimes 3 different things at the same time, and you cannot take your eye off of it. And the second you do, then it's you lose your place. It's very disorienting. It's where was I? And you start to panic, and do I have to start over? And it's almost like it's better to keep your eyes on it no matter what. So
that's a good answer. All right. So right around that time, or just thereafter, you became certified, took more education, certified, became a paralegal in 2014, and then you worked at a law firm. So start with why the decision to become a paralegal.
So I had gone to law school for a couple of years and I liked it, but I loved the reading and the writing, the litigating. Forget it. I mean, if I want to argue, I'll do that for sport, but um, I don't want. It's not what I want to earn my living at. But I thought, okay, I should at least continue this to some degree, and so I decided I finished my studies as a paralegal. And at the time, I met my partner, whom I know you know, and he even said, he's like, "There's so many lawyers out there." He's like, you know, everybody needs a paralegal, and he was right. So in any case, so I'm glad for the education for both. But as it turns out, I'm terrible at both. So because I worked for a law firm, you know, it's a law firm, right? And law firms, they have their own cadence, their own animal, and you know, whether they're, you know, and they operate differently from in-house counsel, right? So you know, and I tried both. And again, I'm just not very good at it, because at the end of the day, when you're reading and you're writing something, you really need large chunks of time uninterrupted by yourself. And as a paralegal, and probably as an attorney, you know, if you're a busy attorney, you've got paralegals working under you, they're constantly asking you for help or something. And then if you're a paralegal, you've got attorneys coming at you. And it's just, at the end of the day, it's just not my style. So, you know, at the end of the day, you play to your strengths. So,
well, I was just going to say, there's the takeaway there. The lesson is, first of all, do what you enjoy.
Yeah.
And know your strengths, know your lane. That's really good.
All
right. We're at another very large company, public company, Analog Devices. So I'm familiar with. Tell us about that role.
So that was really short-lived. That was a very brief contract role, but the reason I included in my experience is because that was supremely technical. I mean, more so than any of the books I edited at the National Consumer Law Center. I mean, like they had style guides and directions on every little thing. And that's not a criticism. It's necessary, because the products they're building, you know, that they're selling are very technical and meant to improve the quality of life and so forth. But that was not particularly creative. So I'm glad for the experience, because it does reinforce, you know, my natural tendency to be detail oriented. But in terms of content, it wasn't anything that was like, oh, I'm really enjoying this. So,
or necessarily passionate about
I suppose that's a better word.
Right?
What's that?
Not necessarily passionate about semiconductors.
Right. Yeah. For some people, but not this person. So yeah.
All right. Then Boston Edits. Right. So you founded it, you know, while you were at Graphique, or somewhere around that time frame.
Right. So yeah. So I mean, I legitimized it 5 years ago in 2019, but I've been doing it on the side for years. And that's honestly, you know, once I was finished with Analog Devices, once I finished my assignment there, it was like, you know what, I have enough of a background and I have enough connections to get started, and I've done enough work. So let me just, and I was in a position where I had the luxury of attempting, you know, to start my own business. And here I am 5 years later.
So tell us about the process, you know, the pitfalls. What was the hardest part of starting the company formally? I mean, to make it a living.
I think the hardest part was I'll tell you what the hardest part was. I would when I first started, I went to every single networking group that came my way. Large, small, early in the morning, after work, all of that. I went to every single one. And looking back now, it's like, I can't believe I managed to get anything done. But you do that when you're starting up, because you want to get the business right, and you don't know where it's going to come from. So you go everywhere thinking that you're going to get, you know, just planting seeds everywhere you possibly can. And within a few months, maybe that's too long. Maybe I'm one of the luckier ones, I guess. I don't know. But it became patently obvious to be very judicious in where I would spend my time and introduce myself to my target audience, really. So I became very aware of that quickly, and have been focusing my attention on that pool of referrals and so forth since then.
Now, we do an LLC yet, or did the LLC become later? Later.
That came in 2019.
Okay.
Yeah. 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 So that, like, that's what I mean. It became official,
Right.
5 years ago, 5.5 now. Yeah. Wow. It's gone by fast.
And your early clients came from that networking, or did they come from other ways?
I would say 90% of them came through the networking. Obviously my partner Brad knows quite a few people, so he made some introductions,
Right.
and then they made introductions. They introduced themselves, and I did belong to a couple of other networking organizations too, and I made some contacts who made referrals and so forth. So I will say, I mean, what helps is getting your message out, but getting it out correctly. And that's obviously what I help my clients do, right? Because everything's transparent to us. And I was very careful about that. I want to be absolutely clear about who I was and what my services offer, my company is about, and why it's valuable to people who might need my services.
All right. So let's dig in there.
Mm-hmm.
We got a few minutes before the bottom of the hour break. Tell us more about Boston Edits.
So I say to people Boston Edits because, I mean, I love to read and I love to write. And this day and age, writing's sake is not enough. There has to be a couple of different purposes to it. Obviously, when somebody is writing and they're publishing, they have something to say and they want people to read it. And that's fine. That's valid. But the writing that I offer my clients has search engine optimization baked into it because it's digital. So, like, for example, and I've seen this before, where they'll publish a website, right? They finally, they put their website together. They've got the content on their website.
Took them months. Yep.
Yeah, it took them months. They did it themselves. And, but it's so transparent to them that they just wrote it. They didn't have it copy edited. They didn't send it to anybody to have another, set of eyes. I mean, maybe there's significant other.
It's pretty awful to say, but I've seen plenty of websites with typos in them.
Oh, it breaks my heart. Because it's like, you can't rely on spell check, but that's another story. Anyhow.
Right.
So, they have their best friend look at it, or their significant other, or I've even had people say, well, my high school student at home is pretty good in English. And I'm like, oh, okay. And younger kids are certainly more tech savvy, right? So, I mean, there might be some truth to that, but it's still wise to have a professional look at it, right? Somebody who's been in the trenches for a long time. And so, when I see people, they've got a good website, but then they don't know how to advertise it, right? Like, they don't, they're not using Google effectively, or they're not using their LinkedIn profile. I mean, any of my clients, talk to any one of them, and they'll tell you they've heard me say this a million times because it's true. Google looks for consistency and it looks for visibility. And that's part of the reason why search engine optimization is so important. If you want to be highly visible, you have to bake in that content, right? So you have to, in the trade, we call it stuffing. You don't want to use, the same word every other word, like sales, for instance.
Right.
You don't want to do that. That's stuffing and that's obnoxious and everybody hates that. But it has to be mentioned enough on your different pages on your website so that Google indexes that. And you have to also be advertising in other places where you have a social media presence, like your LinkedIn profile. Not just your LinkedIn profile, but if your company has a LinkedIn profile, it has to be used there too. And then, you have to post, periodically. I mean, I say periodically, but I mean, some people post every day. I don't know where they find the time. Some people post once a week. Some people post twice a week. And that's just posting, right? A couple of sentences about what it is you do or something you noticed in your industry. Yeah, video, something like that, right? So Google indexes all that, and in order to be, because everybody wants to be the first result on the first page of the search engine results page, right? Yeah. So that all of the writing supports that goal. So that's what I provide for my clients. That's why that's a long explanation, but that's what it is.
With a bit of understanding of what makes SEO work, how realistic is it to be the first place on a list?
So it's realistic if you're constantly using it. And if you're using it, like if you're, for example, if somebody is looking for a divorce attorney, let's say on the North Shore, okay. And they say, divorce attorney near me, divorce attorney, Essex County, divorce litigation, or guardian ad litem. If that family law attorney specializes in either one of those, for instance, that's going to be all over their website. It's going to be, they're going to post about it frequently, regularly across all social media platforms where they have a presence. So likely they're going to come up on the search engine results page. They might not be first if somebody else is paying Google,
right. Right.
Yeah, that's a different animal, and that's another way to go. That's fine. But to do it organically, and I say, when you look at Google Analytics, you look at something organically, it's better if you're promoting yourself the way I've suggested, because
versus just throwing dollars at it.
Exactly. So it's a good gauge. You can look at your analytics, and you can, I do that for my clients. I see, okay, well, how many, they got phone call, which I think that's going away, by the way, with Google's phone calls. But how often is somebody coming up first on the search engine results page? Or are they coming up second on the search engine results page? Are they at least coming up on the first search engine results page, not buried on page 3 somewhere?
Yeah, nobody will ever get there.
Right, exactly.
All right, we're going to take our second break right here, and then we're going to come back and dig more into the work that you do and what it looks like for your clients. We'll be right back with Kim Calvi.
You're listening to Winning Business Radio with Kevin Hallinan on W4CY Radio. That's W4CY.com. Don't go away. More helpful information is coming right up, right here on Winning Business Radio.
The YP.com website is your local search engine. If you're looking for a good restaurant, it can help you find the right one nearby with ratings and reviews. Or if your car breaks down, you can use the YP app to find the closest repair shop. Or maybe you're just looking for something to do on a Friday night. Well, it has great local coupons for all sorts of things in your area. No matter what, when, or where, if you're looking for something, YP Local Search can help you find it. So go to YP.com or download the app to search local, find local, and save local.
And now back to Winning Business Radio with Kevin Hallinan, presenting exciting topics and expert guests with one goal in mind: to help you succeed in business. Here once again is Kevin Hallinan.
We are back with Kim Calvi, owner of Boston Edits LLC and the Word Lady. All right, so take us through, let me mention a topic that you reference in terms of the work that you do, and just give us a little bit about that particular service, writing blogs.
Okay, it's one of my favorite things to do. So I write blogs for my clients, not all of them, but some of them. One of them in particular, I've been writing his monthly blog for every month for the past 4 years now. Wow. And so the way I manage that initiative is he and I meet once a month, same time, via Zoom. I record the conversation, and then he just talks about whatever it is he wants to talk about in business, in his business. Or maybe not his business, but maybe something he's seeing in the market as a trend that other business owners should be aware of, because a lot of his clients are business owners. And so then I take that and then I write my blog based on his comments. And it's usually 2 or 3 pages. And then I send it to him and he approves it. He makes a couple of edits, which is good. I always worry when somebody sends me something back without any edits. It's like, did you even read it? Because it's always a term of art that they know that once they read it, they're like, oh, I should say this here. Okay, that's fine, because that didn't come up in conversation. And, he'll send it back to me, and then I post it on one of his websites, and then I post it on his LinkedIn profile, on his business's LinkedIn profile, and, just make sure that, and then I push it on his LinkedIn profile. I push it to all of the groups that he belongs to really cast the net wide, to really emphasize that he's a subject matter expert in what he's talking about. And he truly is. And he's one of the nicest people I've ever met. All my clients are nice people, because, I avoid working with jerks, but
very good.
Right. And he's a pleasure to work with. And I learn as much as, I'm not just writing, but I always pick up a tip or two as well. And so I get more out of it than just the writing.
I love it. All right. New website copy, and differentiate that from additions or edits to existing copy. I don't know.
Yeah. So, well, I'll do both. So, for example, somebody will say, like, I've got new clients who they have a great website. They came to me with a great website, but there were a couple of, typos on the homepage, and I would point that out, and well, then go ahead and do an entire copy edit or proofread of the whole website. And copy editing and proofreading are 2 different things, by the way. So I will. And then we make those changes, and there we go. sometimes someone will come to me and they'll say, like one of my first clients, she had a website that was like, it was launched when websites were the new big thing, right? So it was a while ago. And her law practice changed a little bit. Her father retired. So there were some changes we had to make to her website. And also websites back in the day, when we first started out, were not as dynamic, were not as snazzy.
Not at all. Not at all.
Right?
Yeah.
Very truncated, very just ugly, right?
The first website I was involved was in the mid-90s.
That's a while ago.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
And maybe hers was too. So anyway, so I inherited that. And so I rebuilt her website, and it completely changed the look of it. And then we rewrote all of the content too, because when the website was launched, she was a younger attorney. Now she's certainly more established, has more to say. She's been published. She's more accomplished in her practice area. And so we had to make sure that we emphasized that on her website, which we did. And so that was, that was good copy. That was a good project. I mean, talk about, sinking your teeth into something for sure.
And making a difference. That's good.
Mm-hmm.
Social media content, I think we get that, but talk about it. And collateral.
Mm-hmm. Right. So collateral, that's a broad term. So so what that means is pretty much anything my client needs it to mean, really. So like, for example, I've had clients, one of my first clients, still a good client in Manchester, New Hampshire. And I built his website for him, and I still manage it to this day, write his blogs. But I also, because he's involved in a lot of charities, he's asked me, can you write this letter? Can you, can you help put together this brochure? For his own company, I put together sell sheets. He asked me to do that one day. He just called me up and he said, I'd like to have sell sheets on these 4 topics. Okay. So I did. We had a conversation about it so I could get some more detail, but then I just curated a lot of the content from the website, and then just obviously what I knew about him, what I know about his business. So that's an example of collateral.
And those would be charged hourly versus project or retainer?
Well, no, for my existing clients, those are, it falls into the auspices of what I do for them as a retainer client.
Cool.
So, yeah. I mean, occasionally though, like a client will say, like, I've got a couple of clients that they have me just do their social media posts, once or twice a month, whatever it is. But if they were to ask me, look, I need a brochure. Okay, then that's a separate project.
Right.
But the thing with editing copyright, it's really, I don't like charging by the hour because I don't know how long something is going to take. And I certainly don't want to misquote somebody. I'd rather just say, here's the the investment fee, for the entire project, versus here's what I charge an hour. That's because I don't want to overcharge. I don't want to undercharge. Somebody's going to lose under that arrangement.
No, that's very good. Website development, that's starting from scratch, right? Do you do the technical part? Do you farm that out?
No, I do that. I do that too. I build it right from scratch. Yeah. Yep. And I do. I've done, I don't know, how many have I done now? I don't know. More than a dozen, less than 20 in the past 5 years. Yeah. Wow. They all look different. My fingerprints are all over, but they all look different. That's good.
That's rolling up your sleeves. Because you know what? I see a number of websites that look very much the same. Right?
Yeah. Well,
why is that?
Well, see, here's the thing. So another one of my trademarks is your voice heard through the written word.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. So 2 and 2, we've heard this before. 2 and 2 will always equal 4. It doesn't matter who does the math, right? But what matters is how we get there. So you could have, again, I'll just go back to family law. You could go, you could have a family law attorney who focuses on, litigation and is also a guardian ad litem and focuses on complex asset division, for instance. And then you could have another family law attorney who focuses on adoption or restraining orders or same-sex unions. Okay, so those are different subjects within family law, number one. Number two, the way they express themselves, those two different attorneys, is very different. One might be a little bit more to the point, and somebody else might, and they're not. I mean, I'm just making this up now.
Right.
But, somebody else could be a little bit more, fluid in the way they communicate, and just more relaxed, and so their tone is different. So the writing has to reflect that, not just the language, but their tone. Because what I say to my clients when they're contemplating working with me is, we want somebody to go to your website and we want somebody to look at your website and read it and say, I like how this person communicates. I feel like how they're communicating resonates with me. And that's
some personality there.
Yes, some individual personality, not just that they're subject matter expert, but also what makes them unique and different. Because, again, somebody else could do the work, but you're going to get, a better result if you like the person, how they're communicating with you. So that's important to capture in the content.
Industry publications.
Yes. So a couple of my clients, one of them I've gotten into Forbes and Fortune. And that was great. It wasn't just advertising. It was a full page article about his particular practice.
That's got to be difficult.
What, his practice or
getting an article published?
They worked with us, they were really good. They were pros too. So they made it easy. I think that if I hadn't been involved, it might have been might have taken a little bit longer because, attorneys are there to do their job. Okay. The social media, that's somebody else's job, right? Which is why they have me. So I was able to, they interviewed him directly, but I saw the article and I was like, okay, well, before you send it to him, you have to let me see it first, because I know I'm going to have to make some changes that he's going to want before he sees it. So we're going to make it as easy for him to review as possible. And that's what happened.
That's really good.
Yep. Yeah. So, it's the value add. So anyway, so it was published as full page. It's beautiful. It's, one of the things I'm most proud of in terms of projects. Proud of for myself, but certainly proud for him. And then, another same attorney, and then another attorney, I got into some publications that are sent out to country clubs, which makes sense for that particular potential clientele. So that's something that comes my way too, that I've got connections on LinkedIn and news outlets and publications. So every now and then it's good to know those people, because they'll reach out to me, or maybe I'll see something that they post in the feed and it's kind of like, oh, hey, I saw that you wrote about this. I'm curious about that, because I might have somebody who might be interested in that. Sometimes it works that way.
Cool. I like it. Video bios.
Yes. So I have video equipment. That's one of those things that's not especially developed with Boston Edits, but I do have all of the lighting and I do have all of the sound equipment and so forth. So if anybody wanted to do a video, like I could go to their office, with their company, and hook up the mic to them, the mic pack, and we could walk around their office.
You set up their background. You make sure they're in the right place, right environment, right lighting.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. I've got the backdrop, I've got the lighting, and
is there a law somewhere that says that lawyers have to be in front of books?
I think they think there is.
I think they think there is. That's funny,
right? Yeah. But I've a couple of lawyers. One of them likes to sit behind his desk with plants behind him, and another one likes to sit at his conference table and just with a cup of coffee. So everybody's got their own style, and I think that it's important to. That style is just as important as the content. The content totally is written, and that's fine. But to really make an impact, you got to have the, for lack of a better way of putting it, window dressing. And because the style, the presentation is what matters too.
For sure. Hey, you mentioned something a little while ago. Clarify copy editing from proofreading.
Yeah. So proofreading is basically like a cognitive thing. For example, like when I proofread a blog that I'm getting ready to publish, before I hit send or publish, I'm proofreading it. I already know that I've copy edited it. And proofreading is easier because I'm looking for cognitive. Like, for example, is the first letter of every sentence capitalized? Is there a period at the end of every sentence? Is there correct spacing between each sentence?
One space or two?
One. We only do one now. And honestly, it took a long time for me to get used to. I freely admit that. I didn't.
You know what? You probably know, but most people don't realize why that was, because in typing school, they would teach you period, space.
Yeah. Oh, I remember that.
And online and digital doesn't need that spacing.
Right. Yep. Yeah. I know. But it still took me a long time to get used to. So yeah. So that's another thing. That's for proofreading in particular. That's what I have to correct a lot of times.
I took a typing class in high school.
You did?
I did. Yeah.
So did
I. It paid off. It paid off.
Right. Exactly. Oh yeah. Yeah. So I will proofread, to make sure, like, cognitively, that everything looks the way it's supposed to. Quotes are where they're supposed to be. Like for example, and this is a big one. Sometimes a word will repeat at the end of one line and the beginning of the next.
Yeah.
That's something else you have to look out for. But and there are other checks that us word nerds perform to make sure that nothing is published before it should be. Has to be correct. So that's an example. Copy editing is different. Copy editing is when, like, for example, and I've got a couple of clients who they're very good writers, so they write their own blogs, and that's fine. And that's what they want to do. But they will send it to me to copy edit. And, I take out my proverbial red Sharpie and I make it bloody because, like, for example, like maybe they'll use punctuation that's not quite correct, or they use a word like the word, I don't know, increase. They use it 3 times in 2 sentences. Like that sort of thing. That's copy editing. Like that's getting into the copy. That's okay. We've got to polish this up a little bit. Use other words, use other punctuation. Maybe shorten a sentence, or maybe take a sentence that's too long and break it into 2. That's copy editing.
How about, this is something I learned in the 11th grade. It's amazing how we can think back and remember this stuff. The first sentence has to be the subject line.
Yeah.
I don't think most people do that. I think they write with more of a stream of consciousness than.
That's the rule.
Yeah.
Okay. But rules are made to be broken. So lots of times you'll get an introductory sentence. Like for my own writing, I'm good with that. I will start off like, I don't, and this kind of, is counter
probably
to
second nature to you.
Well, it is, but it's also, it's I mean, I've been told I have an intense personality, but when I'm writing, I start off kind of slow. Like I will say, this year has been, we've noticed this in the market. We've noticed this, da 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 da. But how does it relate to this subject? Kind of lead up to it instead of landing on someone like a ton of bricks. I mean, both are effective, and in the right context, both are necessary. Either is necessary.
All right. So here's the point you mentioned before. I'll just read. This is from your bio or from your website. Employing copywriting skills, line editing, copy editing, and proofreading skills as appropriate. Your goal is to pair the foundation of American English grammar rules with consistent use of your client's original voice to create a unique brand entity. A unique brand identity which speaks clearly and concisely to their intended audience. That kind of summarizes that well, I think.
Thank you. Yeah. I worked on that sentence a while because there are 3 different thoughts and that's one sentence. It's like, okay. And I say that to people. Let me break it down for you. My writing is 3-pronged, right? Your voice, American English grammar, and I just drew a blank. What's the third thing? I can't even believe this.
Hold on. Just scrolled past it.
Because it's so, this is what I'm saying when I talk about things being transparent.
Foundation of American English grammar rules, consistent use of your client's original voice, and unique brand identity.
The brand identity, because that's the thing. The brand identity is really the result. So if you have somebody's voice, you use grammar correctly, it's going to create a unique brand, a unique product for your client, which is their brand identity. How they want to come across. It's just, I mean, they're subject matter experts. So how do we present that? Again, in a way that is going to resonate with their intended audience. And honestly, their intended audience isn't just who they want for potential clients. It's also their good referral sources too. It has to make sense to their referral sources. So, that's another reason why it's important to be very clear in what you do and who for.
Hey, believe it or not, we are up against the end of time here.
Okay.
I know, right? I told you it's going to go fast.
Yeah.
Who in the listening and viewing audiences should reach out to you and why? And those watching and listening, you'll see watching in particular, you'll see the crawl with her details.
Sure. So a good referral for me is somebody who is, they're a top performer. They're busy with what they're doing. They're B2B, and they know that their social media presence is lacking and that it's sporadic. Like maybe they have a website, but they haven't looked at it. They never look at it. They haven't looked at it in 5 or 10 years. And, they know that the content is, could be more robust now because maybe their business has changed a little bit. Maybe they're offering a couple of other services. They've expanded. They don't use social media to the full because they'd like to, because they know that they should. Their LinkedIn profile is barely a secondary consideration, but they'd like to start using it more because they know that the referral sources are looking at their LinkedIn profile. So they want to present well, they want to posture themselves well. So good clients for me are anybody in B2B who just knows that their social media presence, and also that they're not using Google effectively either. So your website, Google, LinkedIn in particular. On top of everything else that we talked about, those are good clients for me. People who know that they just need to turn it up a few notches to streamline their online presence and really showcase why they're subject matter experts in what it is that they do. Yeah,
try a Google search on what you think people are searching and see where you land.
Well, that's the thing. Yeah. A lot of my clients will say to me, they're like, I can't even find myself. I'm like,
Listen, thank you so much, Kim. I know you're busy. Thanks for being here. I appreciate it.
This was fun. Thank you so much, Kevin.
You're welcome. And thank you, everybody, for watching and listening. This is a show about business and business challenges. If you've got concerns about the growth of your company, feel free to reach out to me on Facebook or LinkedIn at Winning Business Radio, or you can drop me a note. One of my many email addresses is kevin@winningbusinessradio.com. Our company is Winning Incorporated, part of Sandler Training. We develop sales teams into high achievers and sales leaders into true coaches and mentors. We know we're not right for everybody, but hey, maybe we should have a conversation. Thank you to producer and engineer Juan for another job well done. Thank you, Juan. Be sure to be here next week, Monday, June 10th. We're going to do it all over again. Until then, this is Kevin Hallinan.
You've been listening to Winning Business Radio with your host, Kevin Hallinan. If you missed any part of this episode, the podcast is available on Talk4 Podcasting and iHeartRadio. For more information and questions, go to winningbusinessradio.com or check us out on social media. Tune in again next week and every Monday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time to listen live to Winning Business Radio on W4CY Radio, W4CY.com. Until then, let's succeed where others have failed and win in business with Kevin Hallinan and Winning Business Radio.